the presentation in a couple minutes. But thank you everyone for joining us. I am Diane with ASAE in the Business Solutions Group, and we're happy to provide these webinars to you on different topics. This one's on governance. I also host 401k, insurance, investments. So be sure to be on the lookout for our webinars, and we love having you join us.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Diane. Thank you, Kevin, for joining us. And thank you to ASAE and ABSI for hosting us graciously every quarter here. Always love to see, the number of participants and registrants that attend these and the dialogue that happens within the chat here. As I'm looking through here, we have people from all over, from New Jersey to Illinois to even the Virgin Islands, it seems. So always exciting to see where everyone's attending from here today. We have a great session for you. We'll give it a few more seconds here to let everyone file in. But today we're going to be talking about something that I believe, is very timely with, kind of everything going on in the world right now. Looking at some of the relationships that we have internally here. So specifically strengthening the CEO and board partnership with governance technology. It looks like we have a good number of people here, so we'll go ahead and get started. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us here this Thursday afternoon. We have some great material here for you. So I'll introduce myself quickly and then hand this over to Kevin to really do his introduction justice. I feel like I kind of just scratched the surface with everything that you do and what that the Yoga Alliance does. So myself, I'm our association consultant here with OnBoard. So I work predominantly within this industry. I manage a lot of our association partnerships. You may have seen me on some of these previous webinars. I host these quarterly with OnBoard and ABSI as well.
Jordan, so I'm so sorry to interrupt you guys. We're having a little bit of a problem with the captioning again in the codes. So for those of you that have brought this up to me, thank you very much. And we're in the process of fixing this. So, give us a few minutes to have it fixed, and I'm apologizing. Just give us a few moments. Thank you. But Jordan,
no worries.
Just keep going and maybe go slower.
Okay, fantastic. Well, in the meantime, we'll look through here. If I see that everyone's logging where they're coming in from, we mentioned some of the cool areas that everyone's coming in from. While we figure out maybe some of these technical difficulties, which I think we've all found is kind of the standard these days, that there's no virtual event that we run that doesn't have some sort of technical difficulty here. So thank you so much for bearing with us. Maybe throw in the chat, what your role is here, and we'll kind of mix that into our conversation. I should mention here up top as well, as you have questions, there is a Q&A section as well. So feel free to throw those in the Q&A. I like to have these conversations as collaborative as possible. So we'll make sure that we pause throughout the session here and answer any relevant questions, by section here. So fantastic. Diane, how are we looking on your end? Are we good to move forward?
Hi, Jordan. I'm going to start entering the codes for the closed captioning. Again, I apologize to everyone that it's late.
Not a problem.
But you can keep going. Thank you.
Okay. Fantastic. Well,
okay.
Thanks so much.
Hold on, Joseph. Sorry. I'm talking on the phone trying to fix this. I'll mute myself now. Bye.
Thanks, Diane. Well, fantastic. It looks like we have a great mix of personnel and roles coming. So from presidents to executive directors, directors of operation. So hopefully this is very relevant to all of your roles, your associations, and maybe, again, dealing with some of the things that are going on in today's world. So we'll move forward with introductions here. And Kevin, again, for those of you that have attended previous webinars, one of our returning guests here, a fan favorite, I may add. Kevin is the board governance manager at Yoga Alliance, the largest nonprofit member association representing the global yoga community. But I'm going to leave it at that so as to not butcher the rest of your wonderful, title, responsibilities, everything that the Yoga Alliance is doing, Kevin. So let me give you the platform here to share all of that wonderful news.
Sure. Well, it's good to be here with everyone. I hope that today we get to offer you some things that are of value. Maybe you're on a little lunch break tuning into this. I was talking to a friend, they're like, I love listening to webinars while I'm working on other work, and I can't even multitask. But if you're a multitasker out there, we love you. We're glad to have you. But yeah, so I'm Kevin Karras. I use he, him, his pronouns. And yeah, it's been a joy to collaborate with OnBoard and sort of provide some of this thought leadership. And just a little bit on my background, I've been in sort of the yoga and also the nonprofit space for about 10 years. And about half of that, I've worked in sort of a board relational sort of capacity. And, basically helping to oversee all the governance processes, ensuring that we're compliant, with our bylaws and updating policies, facilitating board meetings, committees, communications, the liaison, essentially helping out with all those things. And like Jordan said, I'm at Yoga Alliance, and we are sort of the world's, the largest organization representing, yoga professionals, practitioners, and really advocating for yoga across the globe. We get this like belief that, the more people that practice yoga, the better the world will be. That's our fervent belief. And in a lot of the ways we do that is just by, reducing barriers to the access, by amplifying the power of it and really supporting our community. And yeah, I'll tell you a little bit more about what we do throughout, but Jordan, it's just a real honor to be here with you and everyone, and I'll pass it back to you.
Fantastic. Well, the honor is all ours, all of ours, having you here today. So thanks so much for joining us. For those of you that are not familiar with OnBoard, give you just a brief rundown of who we are and how we partner with ASAE and ABSI. So we're the industry leader in board intelligence software. And our mission really within this industry is simple: is how do we simplify governance for your organization so your board is making the most strategic decisions, the most well-informed decisions, and really moving your association towards its mission here. So as you can see, we have a pretty good footprint within the association and nonprofit space. Again, a lot of that is in thanks to the kind folks over at ASAE and ABSI who use us on their board, endorse us as well, and pass some of that benefit off to you as members. So we'll share some information at the end. I'll share my information if you want to learn a little bit more on how that partnership looks and some of the benefits afforded to you as an ASAE member. So moving forward, though, again, we have a great conversation in store for you here today. These are just some of the goals that we want to get out of today, but hopefully we get a lot more than just the 3 bullets that we have here today. But mainly, again, discussing that relationship between our CEO and board and why that's important. Maybe some of the signs to look for that maybe there is a little bit of dysfunction in that area. With that, be able to provide you some takeaways, some things that you can take back to your daily life, and some guidance with the help of Kevin and some of the things that he's employed with Yoga Alliance today. And then specifically, talk about how board management software like OnBoard really helps drive a unified strategy between that CEO and board working dynamic there. So with that, we'll go ahead and get into it here. So I'd like to start with just, again, it might be a little cliche, but we really want to look at this CEO and board collaboration, that partnership as a relationship, as we look at, any other relationship in our life. And making sure that we have a lot of these areas covered, of establishing trust and honesty, making sure everyone's accountable and understands their responsibility. And that really, is centered around communication, support, respect in that relationship. So how do we ensure we're fostering, the best relationship between our CEO and our board, and providing not only the best tools, but the best environments to lead to a productive relationship between those roles there. So, with that, a good place to start, and, I like to look at kind of what could go wrong out there, and what signs that we might have that there is some dysfunction in that relationship today. So that way we can start to build some healthy habits there, some things that, some best practices, and some things to look for here. So with that, here are just some of the signs, and we'll talk through these a little bit more. And Kevin, I invite you to chime in with, any of the insights that you might have around here. But, just starting off, I read a study that came out last year that was done from McKinsey, where they surveyed directors and executives on the importance of that board collaboration, and found that over 2/3 believed that was highly important. That collaboration between your board and your CEO was highly important to an organization's success and their mission. The alarming part was 1/3 of those respondents, however, would actually rate their board and CEO collaboration as highly effective. Meaning that there are some gaps there, some areas that we really need to focus on to how we strengthen that specific relationship. One of the other things that I found interesting with that study was that those boards that rated and directors that rated their collaboration as highly effective, they were twice as likely to say that their board had a very high impact on the long-term value creation for the organization, and they would rate their board as highly effective. So there's some significant improvements and significant success that can be seen, by having a strong relationship here. But here's some of the signs, really that's there may be some things strange, within a relationship. So everything from just not understanding expectations to, again, leading to redundancy in work and roles. Over management or micromanagement is one that I hear a lot. And again, I think a lot of this starts to diminish some of the last bullet points here of that lack of trust or, difficulty in bringing on new members or just managing, as a whole. So Kevin, be curious to know, with kind of your experience, have you experienced, any of these items, in your own day-to-day life, in your, relationships internally, or, is there anything that you would add to this list that we can start to look for when we're evaluating that board and CEO relationship there?
Yeah. Well, thanks for opening it up to me, Jordan. It's interesting, like, on the previous slide, we were talking about like what are we really talking about here, which is really it's a relationship, right, between the CEO and the board. And I think it's interesting to think about like where do all relationships start? It's with connection. And our organization, we're like very values based, right? Like we're very into our brand and our belief of connection and pursuing progress and really taking action on that in sort of a kind way. And so like a lot of these things, I feel really blessed. So like our board, I started to work at Yoga Alliance in this capacity in 2022. And a lot of that time was, our organization was shifting and evolving. And I think you have to look at like all of us, like what stage of development is your organization at, right? Like, and it's not necessarily hierarchical, I'll say either. Like it shouldn't be the goal to get to a certain point. But when you're thinking about like, what is my organization and what is the role of the board within that, that's like the first thing you really have to know. And if you don't know that, that's where things like unclear expectations and that shows up in the roles that are defined and whatnot. And I don't think that anyone that works for a board ever has malintent or ill intent. I think it's very like driven, purpose-led people, high power folks. But anyways, so at Yoga Alliance, joining in 2022, we have been sort of making an evolution where the board was playing more of a working board, management capacity in addition to the governance capacity that every board has, right? The duty of care, loyalty, obedience. When organizations are at certain size, they might have to do more of the day-to-day management. And our board had been going sort of like through an evolution that, a part of that was utilizing external consultants, thought leaders, folks like ASAE, organizations like BoardSource, to help us make that transition. So I feel really blessed that like there was so much professional like development and things that were occurring in that time so that when I entered in, we were at like a really good place. But these are all the topics we talked about, and we kind of take like a, this is a yoga organization. We're thinking progressive. Like, how can we have a preventative approach? How can we have a proactive approach so that we're not getting to the point where these huge frustrations, right? And that's not to say that we're perfect. I don't want to shed some sort of light like that. But we are like constantly working to make sure that, by giving clarity of our roles, by making sure that there's trust through transparency and communication, using governance technologies for that solution, and really the way in which we onboard our members in a very strategic way so they really know their role right from the beginning. Like we solicit so much feedback during our onboarding phase that the board members last year we did like a recruitment campaign and we had 700 people apply for the board, and we selected 8 new members, and when we brought them in these first 3 months, they're like, wow, like you're still onboarding us and asking questions, like we've never felt so clear. So you should get them to that point where they feel like you're like they're so clear on what they need to do that they're like, I can't believe I'm going to get to learn even more.
Over communicate, yes.
Over communicate, yeah. So yeah, Jordan, that's in terms of this though, I think really having a proactive preventative approach is really important to reducing a lot of those lack of clarity in roles or trust issues, and I'm excited to talk more about how we do that.
That's a great point, and I think, one I think everyone thinks of in some sense, but sometimes, we inherit a situation that we don't have the luxury of being, as proactive. But I think when we get to that point and the steps that we can start to put in place so we can, even in the moment where it might seem more reactive, be proactive for future relationships and future board members and future members of the organization. I think that's a great kind of approach, and to your point, over communicate what roles are and what is needed by each role there as well. So
yeah. And
go ahead.
and I don't mean to interrupt you, Jordan, but I
Yeah.
just wanted to underscore you underscored and I'm like double underscoring that there's a real opportunity when you have like a transition, like board members are terming out or ending and you're bringing new folks in. That's sort of where we did a lot of that change and that shift and that transformation. I know change management can be hard in a lot of organizations. We all know this in like different studies. It's one of the leading things that you have to work on. But I just want to underscore it, like for all the executives here or people that work in this space, there's a real opportunity in those moments to make the change. And I would encourage you all to do it because we're like on a really good side of it here, and it feels good once you do it, right? But it's a little
Yeah.
hard maybe in the early phase.
Yeah. And I feel like that's a testament. You were saying with 700 applicants, that came from 70 last year, and before that, just seeing that growth, I feel like is a testament in itself to that approach. So
Thanks, Jordan. Yeah.
Yeah, and we had a question come in that kind of relates to more of maybe those scenarios where we have to be a little bit more reactive, but if trust is perceived to have been breached, what steps should be taken to remediate the situation? Now, I know we'll get to maybe some of those areas throughout the conversation. Is that something you'd like to address now, Kevin, or as we go through here, do you think some of the points that we'll have around some of those best practices will help shine a light on maybe some solutions there?
Yeah, I would say that we should go through all of this, but like my first instinct is a breach of trust could come from a lot of different ways. So I don't want to just give some kind of generic statement because that could mean a lot of things. So maybe if there's some more color that could be added, and we'll keep moving on, and maybe near the end we can visit that if it's not already addressed.
Great.
Unless
Yeah,
you
that
have
sounds like
thoughts that you want to
no,
add.
no. I think as we start to build this picture out through this conversation, I think maybe some solutions and some more clarity around that might appear here. So, with that, moving from again some of the things that to look for some of the areas to really monitor and some of the risk of, having a strained relationship there. Really want to start to build some of those best practices and share, some of our ideas around, where we see, again, where we start to build that relationship, and then how we strengthen it from there. So, one of the things in our planning sessions here, I thought was just a really great viewpoints on looking at this holistically was, backing this all the way out, zooming all the way out to starting with a strong strategic plan. So would you mind, kind of expounding on your thought process behind that, Kevin? And again, maybe some of these points here within this slide.
Yeah, sure. Well, yeah, this was like an exciting thing in our lead up conversations of just talking about sort of our experience with strategic planning. I know strategic planning for all of us is like, it could be its own 10-week series or whatever, So like I'm trying to condense this, but I'm hoping in sharing a bit of like how we approach this, it might help to say how like right from the beginning we can build a strong collaboration with the CEO and the board. So in addition, in 2022, when I had started, we were undergoing sort of our strategic planning process, and we were building up like a 5 or 6 year plan. And sort of the way that we approached it was with an appreciative inquiry approach. And if folks aren't familiar with that, you can, of course, Google and research it a bit more. It comes out of Case Western University. I saw some other Ohioans here, but as myself. But basically, what it is it uses a positive approach to envisioning the future from like a strengths based, right? Like, what are our strengths, and how do we use that to visualize the future? And the way that we did it in a really collaborative way is we brought in a consultant. It's always good to have your consultants that are the expert on the topic. And even if you're at a lower budget, you might find someone who can do it in kind. I know when I've had to work with smaller boards, we've done that sort of thing as well. But really, it collaborated with our CEO, the board chair, board members, members of the leadership team throughout all levels of the organization, external stakeholders, members. And we really gathered a lot of these perspectives that are a part of our community, right? And when you think about collaboration, I think you want to make sure that all the voices are heard and it's inclusive, and really having that DEIAB approach of making sure that everyone's voice is heard. And we took that and collaborated in a really this dynamic activity that led to sort of a summit, a live experience, which we did online. And all those points of input were just so instrumental in crafting the strategic plan. And what's cool is like from doing that process, I think it really cultivated a lot of trust. There was a lot of transparency. And now when we think about it, like all the board members were a part of creating that plan, right? And it's moving towards this mission and vision. It's facilitating a core duty of board members, that duty of, care, obedience, loyalty, like it's ensuring that we're moving towards that. And whenever we recruit new folks, like I was talking about onboarding, and the 700 people that applied, there was a lot of transparency in that. And one of the things we really looked for in people we recruited, so everyone take these notes, like how aligned are new board members coming on to the strategic plan that is so representative of your community? And if they're not with it, that's probably a misalignment. So I think when you think about this board CEO collaboration, it can start with the strategic plan. And even when you bring new people on, make sure they're with it. And some people could say a 5 or 6 year strategic plan could be a long ways out. Like, oh, we do ours every year or 2 years or 3 years. But, we work then, of course, like underneath of that on an annual basis where the strategic leadership team, right, the heads of function or the report to the CEO are really helping to provide updates at the annual board meetings of like, how are we moving towards these strategic goals? And again, it's cool to see how that comes together with the board in a way that's like, they're able to provide their strategic insights, but again, they're playing a governance role, so they're not getting down into that micromanagement. And but we're able to offer all their wisdom. And I, I was joking about this. This may seem like a tangent, but I was joking about it when we were talking about it. Like in yoga, we're all into health and wellness, and I've been learning a lot about the microbiome. And they say like in your microbiome, when you have a diverse microbiome, you can fight off different sicknesses and navigate different things. And so we approach, our board like the microbiome too, right? Like the more diverse perspectives we have there, the more insight they can provide to the strategic team. And then ultimately, it's the CEO's decision, though, of how to drive that work forward with her team. And it's just a beautiful way that the strategic plan helps to foster that CEO board relationship.
That's an incredible way to look at that, looking at it as a microbiome. That's something that I've never thought of before. And I feel like that is a perfect analogy, for the board. And when we look at dysfunctions and we look at things going wrong, again, looking at some of those criteria that went into selecting this board to begin with. So, I know appreciative inquiry, that was something new to me in our conversations leading up to this. So definitely a great way to look at this and really, again, create that shared vision. So I feel like that helps with the engagement piece. So maybe some other things that we're not even talking about here today, but also helps foster really that collaborative spirit and that collaborative relationship, understanding that everyone was selected because they align to this shared vision and to this shared strategic plan. So I feel like that intrinsically, can help improve what that relationship is as well.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Absolutely.
so fantastic, great insights there with kind of starting again with the strategic plan and again, everything's kind of that trickle down effect from there. So, moving forward from there, looking at some of those, healthy board leadership dynamics. And I know we've touched on some of this already of just setting what that clear expectations, roles, and responsibilities. It sounds like you have a very collaborative approach to that. So, as we just discussed, and really kind of opening that up to that shared plan there. But was there anything that you wanted to kind of expand upon, as it relates to what these dynamics are and, just understanding that communication and role and, making sure that these working relationships are where we need them to be?
Yeah, so I wanted to get a little bit into the specifics, right? And I'm sorry to all the executives out here who this feels like common knowledge. In my journey of understanding board governance, like what I'm about to say was just like such a key pivotal understanding. Again, if this feels rudimentary to anyone, I apologize. But getting back to foundations and basics, that's an accessible thing to do always. So just sort of level setting, right? You got your organization. When you incorporate, you have your charter, right? Hopefully you file that with the government. You don't have to look at it too much. And then you got your bylaws, right? And your bylaws really is like the high level governing document that sort of guides the board. And in that sort of bylaws, exists underneath that is sort of policies, right? And some boards, they might just live at this level, right? Of just like creating policies for how they operate, how the org operates. And under there, you got your procedure documents and all these working plans and annual project management, all that stuff. So there's lots of levels of how you get the work done from a governance down to like a management level. And I think that something that's interesting with ours is we try to be like continuing to pursue progress, continuing to take action on these things. Like our bylaws don't just live in a place. Like the way that we have our organization currently structured, right, is you have your board chair who's essentially the head of the board, and her cabinet of officers on the executive committee, and we have our four sort of standing committees: executive, governance, finance, and audit. And we can form pop-up ones if we need to, though I think it's good to like sunset, sunrise, sunset committees if you can. But we have those four standing ones, and with sort of our governance like model of how we do is all the board work is divided up into one of those buckets. And with our governance committee, we're constantly analyzing our bylaws so they don't just like sit on a shelf. Almost, and I wouldn't say that you should like always be changing your bylaws, but ours truly is a living and breathing document that we're voting on and updating as we grow and evolve. So And then underneath that, of course, we're bringing a lot of the policies and roles and responsibilities. Each of those officers, each of those committees, making charters, and again, analyzing those on some frequency. We do it every 2 years. We have in our, our cycle of how we look at things, but we certainly do it quicker than that if something arises. And also another way that we sort of continue to evolve and collaborate is we're in a constant state of gathering feedback. I know when you look at like performance and of board members or staff or whatever it is, like sometimes these can be seen in like annual cycles where we just, have an assessment. But what we do is we check in after every board meeting, and there's governance technologies to do that, but there's also a relational dimension of that, like and making folks feel seen and heard, like in a healthy relationship. Now I'm like getting a little human about it, but it's like in a healthy relationship, you're constantly talking about like, hey, where are we at? What are our goals? Are we moving towards our vision? Are we moving towards what we planned? And life isn't always like how you planned it, right? Sometimes you need to adjust. But if you're all on board and flexible and willing to do that and communicating with transparency, and a lot of governance technology we're going to talk about can help to create that transparency, I think you can bring everyone along. So, yeah, I think that's a lot of the main things that I wanted to say about that bit.
Awesome. No, I think that's great insight. Really, just governance isn't just a set it and forget it, process that we have. Those bylaws, those policies have to be ever changing as the organization changes, as the external pressures that we face change, as we, those relationships continue to evolve. Everything along those guiding documents have to really evolve with it. And I love what you said really around, kind of checking in after each meeting. I don't know at many organizations that take kind of that assessment and that working relationship to that level, to ensure that everything again is moving in the right direction cohesively. Because and I think that's something we'll get to a little bit later on, of one of the best practices of having kind of that checks and balances and having assessments in place, but taking it to the level where it is just again more relation focused instead of just a process that we do every year. It's actually caring about communicating that meeting in and meeting out, I think will really lead to ultimately strengthening that relationship.
Yeah, it's almost like it has some formal and informal levels within all of it. And like, I know we were talking a bit about evaluation too. Uh, like that evaluation, or I'll let like in terms of it, it doesn't just happen with the board, right? It's also one of the key responsibilities of a board, if you're at this like stage of development, is really, your hiring of your CEO and assessing their performance each year, right? And so having a way to sort of like set those goals with the CEO and a way to check in with those on a regular basis, and a way to like a platform to kind of do that in a discreet, confidential way, but in a way that as chairs succeed. So that work lives with our chair and our executive committee, right? As they pass, like that can be in a documented place. You need some place to keep those sorts of files, and really all of these files, right? For your historical archive. And yeah, I'm excited to talk about all the technology because I think that's what we're here to get into. This was like, for everyone here, this was all just the build up to talking about the technology.
We're setting the framework here to show you the rest of the picture here. So
yeah.
no, but I think that's just great way to think about it, as well. Just as that process as a whole of having the process in place, but then having your own process around it that's not as formal. So, to your point, having a balance of formal and informality, with that process today. So, and I think that takes us into, really kind of the governance tech piece of it here, which we mentioned some of this, but, regardless of the software that you use, or the systems that you're putting in place. Some great things to really look for. And we hit on some of it today, but just at its core, having that central place that everyone is communicating in the same standard. They have access to the documents that keep you aligned with that progress. And to Kevin's point, somewhere that you can check in on what those goals were and where you're at from those goals. And software that helps you, conduct those assessments, not only of the CEO, but the board of themselves. Having a board self-assessments either annually or biannually, is just a great process to have, and something to look for, with both software and just support out there of who can help you with conducting kind of the best practice around those today. With that, a lot of it's kind of flows into each other here of having everything in one place allows you to streamline those communications, again getting back to some of those dysfunctions and best practices of just understanding what my role is, having a software that's helps filter out all the things that aren't under my purview and keep the things that are, really helps keep my focus on what that role is there. And then again, relating it back to having those ever evolving policies and bylaws. If you have one place for that everyone is, seeing all of that in real time, again, that keeps everyone kind of on the same page there, keeps that engagement high, which we talked about. Even going back to the approach that you take in strategic planning and recruiting board members, ensuring that we have kind of that cohesive shared vision, that in itself can help increase with a lot of that engagement as well. And then just having that all really in a designed place to house all of that. So, that's kind of my spiel on the board management piece here, but want to get more so into specifically, how we're using this today at Yoga Alliance, how this has helped in some of the areas that we've discussed, up to this point. Starting with, again, kind of right on cue there with that centralized digital cloud-based collaboration structure. So Kevin, if you could, you kind of walk me through how this has helped foster that relationship, help better understand roles, help with your meeting operations and things along those lines.
Yeah. Well, I think like every organization has sort of their mission, they have their vision, they have something that they're driving towards. For us, our tagline we often say is more yoga, better world. And I think to like really do that, we have to be pursuing progress. And in this sort of day and era, if you aren't utilizing a technology, you're really not with the times, right? And things just continue to evolve. So having OnBoard has been such a key place for management of all this sort of software and just like getting into these specifics like you're talking about, Jordan, with the sort of central repository for documents, institutional knowledge, and training. There's a bunch of features in OnBoard, right? And I think one of the cool features is this resource folder. And you can use the platform in a lot of sort of flexible ways. And the resource folder on one level can be a place where your archive lives, right? So we all have a compliance duty to fulfill, right? And I think what happens when it lives in one person's SharePoint and then they leave another person's SharePoint, or this officer, right? What happens over time, I think you lose institutional knowledge. And of course, you have your document retention policies. You don't need to keep everything forever, but you could. And having this resource folder in a way to organize it, just like you would anywhere else, in your any sort of like digital foldering, you can label it the way you want. And it's cool because I was mentioning this earlier, it's all permissions based. So certain groups can have access where others can't. Of course, we try to have a high level of transparency. I think transparency builds trust. It's a progressive way of being, but some things, are confidential. And so like it could go, like I said, maybe the CEO's performance plans can go from one chair to another. And also it was so nice and I see everyone's getting excited about in the chat here. We're going to talk about that meeting function here in a minute. But we used it also for our onboarding. And as I mentioned earlier, like we've been getting a lot of positive feedback, and I think part of that is like we have this repertoire of where all these governing documents aforementioned, bylaws and policies and procedures and schedules, they can all live there. And that sort of leads, well, Jordan, how do you want to go with this? Do you want to take pauses between features, or do you want me to go, do you want to free thought through all of the features?
Sure. No, we can certainly, kind of take pause and just
Yeah.
understand a little bit more, when it comes to, I know we're kind of getting into kind of the collaboration or into the resource side of things. Do you utilize that today to do any collaboration within the platform, or, communication through that with other members, or how does that look?
So a lot of like our collaborative process, I think exists in this sort of meeting operations feature, right? So there's a meeting tab, and everyone's jamming out on this in the chat. If you're live here, you're seeing that. If it's a recording, I'm letting you know what's occurring in the communication, and it's everyone's excited about it. So like what the meeting feature is basically it's got a lot of functions to it, but one of which is it's your calendaring feature, right? So you can have all of your, whatever it is, your committee meetings or your annual board meetings, or any sort of meetings, all scheduled through that there. And in addition, what's nice about collaborating within that platform is you can build your documents and your materials there. And again, we're in a day and era where I really hope that in this group, no one is sending physical paper or materials. Now, I get there could be accessible reasons for this. So I don't want to say that there isn't a need for that. And we do offer that if someone needs a paper material. But having a sort of a digital place where you can add in all of your different files, PDFs, Word documents, whatever they are, and it can build an automatic packet, a board packet, and whether that's going to committees, whether that's going to your annual meeting. It's such an organized thing. And say, if your current process, even if you're digital, but you're PDFing it, what happens if your material deadline is, whatever it is, 3 days, 5 days, 10 days before a meeting? And within there's a material that changes, right? And now you show up at the meeting and wait, are we in this version of the materials? Are we in this version? What's nice about having this housed in OnBoard is if you have to change a material, you can change it. Everyone still has now the same board book that they're going to be looking at. You can add a note, a notation, and there's a lot of cool collaborative tools within that functionality too. The notation, annotations between members, and seeing what people's thoughts are leading into a meeting. And when you're sending those materials and getting people prepared, that is really, I think, a key way to collaborate, right? Like people feeling prepared. I don't know, like in any relationship, if you feel like you know what you're going into a conversation versus like, this is the worst text you could ever receive in a personal relationship. We need to talk.
Yes.
With no information, right? But like sending our materials in the meetings feature is like the transparent, like, hey, this is exactly what we want to cover. And you get to think about it leading up to it. Like, what a healthy way to navigate conversations and pool on a board member's volunteer time and make it easy and organized for them, right? So that's how we sort of collaborate.
That's great. And I think that leads to making sure that board meeting time, you're getting the most out of that time. And that, I guess for lack of a better term, that collaboration isn't occurring in the board meeting when people are seeing this for the first time, or, haven't discussed any of this information leading up to that meeting. So I think that, ensures that that time's used the most effectively. And again, kind of fostering all of that communication and that relationship outside of the meeting as well. So, which we got into some of the document editing and the messenger. Do you utilize messenger much when it comes to communicating with groups internally? How does that look?
Yeah, so as I was mentioning, and again, I'm trying to educate everyone here so you all understand like some of the jargon, even for the platform. Uh, Within the platform, they have what's called a directory, and basically, when you enroll folks into it, you can add folks into the directory, right? That's everyone that's on the platform, and then you can organize those into groups. This is a really cool feature actually because groups can continue to evolve. So if someone comes in But like someone terms out. So say your committee's like us, we have 2-year terms, and then we like to cycle board members through their 2-year committee service on each committee. They can serve up to 2 3-year terms in their overall service. Uh, you can remove people in and out of these different groups. But like the groups, so your folders can be assigned based upon a group. Your meetings can be assigned on a group. You're right. Your resource folders can be a group. And then what happens is as you add new people, that whole archive of all the past meetings and all the past folders, that's all there. Right. And then you can decide how much you want to clean that up. You're like, oh, we don't want them to see everything. I mean, like, but think about transparency and trust. Like, wow, I don't think everyone would want to, like board members, these are usually high powered people. They don't have time to go back, but they could. And that's such a trust building activity. And I'm asking you asked me about Messenger. I get to it in the securest kind of way, everyone. We're getting there. So also you can assign messengers to groups. So then, you can have folks added in there and continue, your sort of conversation thread. So um, I we do utilize that for that feature, and yeah.
Fantastic.
And I'll just say this too. This was easy for us to get the board members into this. Like, I was going to say this as a closing thought, but I'm just feeling moved. Like, I know when I started in 2022, they had tried to like custom build something on a few different platforms, right? Like string together some of the technologies they already had. And I think it was a hard time adopting. Now, I don't know if, what the nature of that was. They didn't have someone who was like in my role either, like someone who is designed role as a staff member is to manage a board. I think every organization should have that. I'm just pitching to all the CEOs out here. If you can make that role, don't let it sit on the edge of your desk or one of your people's desk. Assign a role to it. If you can build it out into your succession planning for skills gaps and your HR, like get someone to do that. But anyways, I feel like when we implemented this, it was adopted so seamlessly, and it's just so intuitive, all these things that we're talking about. So it's a no-brainer for us. So anyways, I'll keep going on, Jordan. I don't mean to get salesy. That sounded a little salesy, but it really, it's just the truth.
No, and I really appreciate that. And it's actually very timely because we had a comment in the chat saying that they're having trouble getting their board to adopt the platform and to get them to log in. It looks like it might be starting kind of with the board chair not liking to use the platform, and that's trickled down to the rest of the board. So I think a lot of the things that you had mentioned might be some good solutions, some good talking points around getting them to use the platform. This might be the rare case where someone has OnBoard, but it's not actually being used. Do you have, any advice there of maybe a selling point once you already have OnBoard in place, but getting your board members to use it?
I'm reading the chat message here, and so I'm just keeping names discreet here just so that anyways, but I hear you, individual who has shared this for lack of confidentiality, and I just really feel for you, want to like offer some kindness and empathy in your situation. I think you're not alone in people having challenges with implementing things. The way that I did it was, remember my tip earlier? There was a golden nugget earlier. And that nugget was when you're shifting to new board, like when board members term out, there's a real opportunity there. And that's the opportunity we seize to make big changes. And then now we're just in a culture of values of pursuing progress and taking action on those. But up front, that's how we had to, and getting a consultant in who's a thought leader on how to do those things. Because board members might not be a thought leader on a portal, or you know what I mean? So like it's up to us to offer them the professional development. And though it's hard if your board chair is not on board because they're essentially leading. So I think it's like, I don't know what your role is in the organization, but if you have a relationship with the board or whoever the CEO, executive director, whoever the head figure is, I'm assuming you have a staff. Um, I think there has to be a real like, radical candor conversation with the board chair and see if you can get them on board. And if they're not, like what is their term? When are they going to roll off? And maybe that's your opportunity for succession planning. You think, okay, maybe not now, but where do we want to go in the future? And work with your consultants or however you have to get to a future where you could have a board chair that's in support. And hopefully that's at the base of it, like having a board chair who's in support of the CEO to get the work done and drive it forward. The board's work is a whole nother body of work of the org. So I would say build that relationship up, or think about the future succession planning. That's my instinct.
That's a great point, a great recommendation with that, and I think your board is a living testament to how well that can work and that process that you put in place there. So,
Yeah.
but I'm sorry, go ahead.
I see they're saying they also didn't have a staff member in place to manage the board. So
Yeah, I feel
anyways.
like that's a crucial piece there as well. So moving forward, just to so we get through the last couple slides here. Again, we can briefly touch on some of this, and we've talked about this as well of having accountability. But I think after having this conversation, approaching that with more empathy and a little bit more informality, maybe that's. It's not a punitive measure necessarily. It's more so to make sure that everyone, again, is still marching towards that cohesive goal, that cohesive strategic plan. Would you say that's fairly accurate with kind of the accountability piece and looking for some of those tools within a platform?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what you have me thinking about is like even within these like assessments and survey tools, right? Your actions, your annual assessment, I'm still a little online to get a solution to this person, but for all folks, like those annual assessments, the sort of question you ask will determine what sort of answers you'll get. So you might say, hey, board, we're in an evolving technological environment and we want to keep moving our organization towards its mission, right? We want to, whatever it is. And part of that is ensuring that we have the technology. So for your annual survey, you might ask a question that's like, what do you, something related to the technology, where it'll get an answer that there's some sort of gap. And then when you bring that to the next cycle of assessing that, whatever process through your committees, promote a new solution and go for it. And I know there's the challenges in the past, like I know our board before my time, like they had challenges with the issue in the past with the technology, but like we just moved forward and it's been so seamless now. So I'm just saying like the assessment tool in OnBoard, which is the action feature, I guess I should have prefaced with that. There's an action functionality where you can build surveys, assessments, and all these sorts of matters. And that's also the place where we collect not just that annual assessment feedback, but also that after each board meeting and such.
It's fantastic. Yeah, I would say the assessments within OnBoard is a very powerful way to see, gather what everyone's thinking, how they think, you're moving towards a lot of those areas that you want to progress there. So I see we've got about 5 minutes left, so I want to get to some Q&A here before we wrap up. Moving back to our conversation from our very first question that came in. I'm hoping there might be some more insight around and maybe some things that you've taken from what Kevin shared up to this point of if that trust has been breached, how to remediate that. So I think, your point, Kevin, maybe around that succession planning. And as we get closer to looking at, evaluating that next board member, that next member, that might be a good time to start to look at remediating that situation. Is that fair to say, do you think?
Yeah, did we get any more background information on the issue?
I don't believe so. So we can always take that one offline. And
Yeah,
I can